What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Happy Friday, broadcasting live from Arkansas here on LFA TV. Really do appreciate it. We got a great show for you. We're going to talk to Jeff Younger. Jeff Younger, the guy that's been fighting trans insanity, a way that many of us would not want what happened to Jeff Younger to happen to any of us in our worst nightmare. But he's been fighting for his son. He's been fighting for truth. We're going to talk about that. Then coming up, hopefully at the top of the next hour, we'll be talking with the candidate from South Carolina, challenging Lindsey Graham, Mr. Mark Lynch. Let's get into it. We got a great show for you planned this Friday.
Paul Harrell program.
Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us. Jeff Younger. You guys have heard me talk about Jeff Younger, but I do not believe that I have gotten an interview. I know I haven't gotten to interview him since I've been on LFA TV. And so the story of Jeff Younger is one of tragedy and also perseverance. I've often said that Jeff Younger, I think, is the most patient father in the world, and that is because of the story of Jeff Younger's ex-wife kidnapping his children in an effort, taking them to California in an effort to transition them, or at least one of them. And so I wanted to have Jeff back on the program to share and give us an update about where he is in this situation, because we do have an administration that at least says we want to end the mutilation of children, and we can talk about that little controversy that happened last week with a Truth Social post that went up and then was taken down. But I am looking at a document that Jeff Younger sent me that his ex-wife is pursuing a legal battle in order to show cause in recognition of a minor's change of gender and issuance of a new birth certificate. So now Jeff Younger's ex-wife is trying to make this whole process official and get the government to say that his son is actually a girl. Jeff Younger joins us now. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you, man, and I love talking offline. Give us an update. Feel free to fill people in and give them the high points about what got you to this point. You have spent millions of your own money fighting for your children, and I God bless you for that, but give us an update, sir.
Well, I mean, I'll give you the short version. I was living in Coppell, Texas. My then wife, who's a pediatrician, began to transition my 2.5-year-old son to a girl, but he began telling him that he was a girl. When I told her she couldn't do that, she filed for divorce. Prior to that, she had convinced me to move, and we moved right across the county line into Dallas County, which is very left-wing. We went into the left-wing judiciary in Dallas County. Every single psychologist that's ever seen my son has lied. And fortunately for me, I've been able to prove it to the courts. And so the courts have set aside their testimony. But every single psychologist has lied and tried to transition my son to a girl. My son made an outcry to a psychologist, Dr. Susan Fletcher, here in Texas. She practices out of Frisco, Texas, and said he didn't want to be a girl, that he was embarrassed wearing dresses. And she filed a complaint against me and refused to give me the medical records so the court could review that outcry for my son. She got an attorney that is closely associated with the governor of Texas, came up from Austin and represented her so that I couldn't get those medical records. So just had a whole
So wait, hang on.
thing.
The attorney in that case, you say, is close to Greg Abbott?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The Republican establishment does not want to pass laws against transing children. And that's just something that Republicans are going to have to get their head around. So in Texas, that was the case. It took me over 7 years to get a law against this in Texas, and a lot of money, and I had to work on it full time. And the Texas legislature fought me tooth and nail, absolutely tooth and nail. And right up to the line on the Health and Human Services website in Texas, that is the responsibility of Governor Abbott, they had an entire page on how to transition your son to a girl. So I eventually made them take that page down. Ken Paxton helped me a lot and did a review of Texas law and found that transing children was already child abuse under Texas law. And that's what caused HHS to bring those pages down and to stop transing kids. And to stop CPS in Texas from taking kids from parents who refuse to trans their kids. So anyway, I got less than standard possession time, and my ex-wife continued to trans my son. The school began to cooperate with her in Coppell, Texas. There was an elementary school called Pinkerton Elementary. They've since shut the school down because of my activism. But Pinkerton Elementary, Principal Mickelson is her name. I would literally take my son to school in boys' clothes, and the teacher would give my son a dress and make him use the girls' restroom. And they hid that from me for over a year. Turns out that's legal in all 50 states, even in Republican states, for schools to trans kids like that behind the parents' back. I can explain to you why. That led to another trial in 2019, and at that trial I won. I got 50-50 custody, no child support, but most importantly, I got a check on all medical procedures so she couldn't transition my son. The liberal judges in Dallas County moved my case into the 301st District Court under Judge Mary Brown. I call her Judge Bloody Mary Brown. Bloody Mary Brown stripped me of all my parental rights and let my ex-wife move to California, where it was legal to castrate kids because I had gotten a law passed in Texas to outlaw these practices. I went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Texas on an emergency mandamus. And the Supreme Court of Texas ruled that my son was no more in danger in California of being castrated than he would be in Texas, and allowed her to move my son to California, where he was promptly chemically castrated. I had another trial in California where I tried to stop it. I demolished all of the transgender experts. The court simply threw out all of the expert testimony and didn't listen to any of the psychologists, and he gave my ex-wife full decision-making authority. I can't even know my son's name. She changed his name to a girl's name. And now she's filed for a California birth certificate that would formally and legally change my son to a girl. And I must add, to this date, it's now been 11 years, Paul. You and I have been talking about this for about 6 years.
Wow.
But it's 11 years since I've been fighting this to get a law passed. To this date, the federal Congress will not pass a law making this child abuse in America, castrating little boys and cutting the breasts off little girls. The federal Republican Congress will not pass a law making this child abuse.
So I think the audience understands why I called you one of the most patient father in the world because of this. I honestly, I don't know how you are. I don't know how you've made it. It's got to be only by the grace of God that you.
Oh, definitely, most definitely, yeah.
Okay, praise the Lord for that. So a couple of follow-ups. Why is it currently legal in all 50 states for teachers to trans children behind their parents' backs?
Okay. All of the states allow licensed care providers. That includes teachers, school nurses, school psychologists, any psychologist or psychiatrist, medical doctor, any licensed care provider can exert a right of privacy for a child against the parent. This was initially created so that if a child made an outcry of child abuse, you didn't have to notify the parent of that because it could put the child in danger. So they're using these laws, which allow licensed care providers to exert a right of privacy against the parent. And they will trans your children behind your back and say they don't have to tell you because it might subject the child to sanctions from the parent. And all 50 states have these laws.
It's disgusting. All right, so we can the states, individual states, theoretically could go after this and could change it. And have any tried to do that? I think I read somewhere where one state has tried to do that.
So what has happened is they've said schools can't trans the children.
Okay.
But the problem is that won't stop the school nurse or school psychologist from doing it. So one of the problems that we have here in the Republican Party, fundamentally the problem is this. We have a far left donor base for the Republican Party. Miriam Adelson, who's the largest donor to the Trump administration. And by the way, I'm a three-time Trump voter. I'm actually a large Trump donor. So I'm pro-Trump, but I'm just telling the facts. Miriam Adelson funded the transgender story hours for kids in libraries. If you watch any Republican National Convention meeting online and you watch those, you'll see there's always a cross-dresser up there. They put Lady MAGA up there last time. This is just a man in a dress. That's because Miriam Adelson is very pro-trans and very pro-LGBT, and she's the largest donor to Trump. The largest donor to the Republican Party is Paul Singer. Paul Singer founded the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest and most powerful transgender and LGBT lobby group in the world. They're the ones that created all of the incentives to hire transgender and LGBT people into corporations and give them preferential hiring treatments. This is the largest donor to the Republican Party. So we have a far left donor base in the Republican Party. The voter base is far right. It's very conservative. So how do elected officials solve this problem? What they do is they introduce loopholes into bills, and they know that the average voter is just not going to, even the careful voter, is not going to read the laws and find these arcane legal loopholes. So, for example, they passed a bill saying, in Texas, schools can't trans kids behind parents' backs. But they didn't change the law allowing psychologists and nurses to exert that right of privacy. So they left a loophole. When they passed the bill that outlawed transing kids in Texas, they took out the criminal provisions that I put in the bill. So it's not criminal, they just outlaw the medical practices. That's how my wife was able to move my son to California and get the procedures done, because it wasn't classified as a criminal act in Texas. So they always do, the same with abortion, right? Everybody thinks Texas outlawed abortion. Well, we passed a law outlawing the medical procedure and sanctioning doctors. But nowadays, it's not doctors doing abortions. It's mothers doing abortions by taking pills that poison the fetus and kill it. So they always leave loopholes so that the liberal donors get their left-wing wishes so people can do it, but it sounds conservative. So they'll come to the conservative voting base and say, wow, you see how conservative I am? I passed a law outlawing transing kids. Then they go to their liberal donors and say, hey, you can still give me that $1 million because we took out the criminal provision so they can go to Colorado or California and still trans their kids. That's the game that's being played on Republican voters. Yeah. And it's just time for this stupidity to stop.
No, it is. And this is a deception. This is a form of lying, and they're duping us, and we've got to demand more. Last week, there was a Truth Social post, Donald Trump promoting the SAVE Act, and in the SAVE Act, he adds something in this Truth Social post that a lot of people tried to say was a fake post, but it wasn't. As a matter of fact, while we were live on air, about to cover it, we're going to cover what Trump said about the SAVE Act, where he put in there, hey, we're going to ban the mutilation of children unless the parents agree to it, written consent to it. In real time. That link was real. I went to refresh it because I wanted the viewers to know it was real, and the link went dead there as we were covering it, and then we found the updated post where it was amended, where he took out the part about if the parents can consent. Now, the statement, the fifth point there, we're going to ban the mutilation of children unless the parents consent, was a big statement, because he used the word mutilation as if in any context mutilating kids would be okay. So the backlash was swift. I mean, there was people from everywhere on the right. Well, there were some that were trying to defend it, by the way. But everywhere on the right was just like, okay, this is a bridge too far. There is no way we can support this. There is no way we can say that this is good. And then the post was deleted, and it was reposted to just say, we're going to ban mutilation of children for minors. We're just going to ban the whole thing. My question to you is, how does that happen, Jeff Younger? How does somebody in the Trump administration write something so stupid and evil at the same time?
Because they know they have. This is what the actual program is. The program is just what I said. they are going to push laws that have loopholes that still let parents trans their kids. And the big thorn in their side right now is the executive order that Trump passed, which doesn't have any loopholes. And so they're struggling with, how do we pass a bill that looks so bad against that executive order? And consequently, the Congress has just sat there and said, we're not going to pass any bill at all. So what you have is a staffer who's trying to work with Congress to pass these bills and to get the SAVE Act passed and so forth. And they know what Congress is going to pass and what it's not going to pass. And your Republicans in your Congress are not going to outlaw transing kids. They're going to let parents mutilate their kids.
I think that you're absolutely right. So it is. I don't know. I mean, I'm speechless at this. I mean, what?
And people are going to say, well, but it requires both parents. No, it doesn't. Family courts at any time can say this parent has medical decision-making authority, and then it's just one parent. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're doing all over the country, even in conservative states.
Yeah. So
this is what they're going to do. And the reason is, ultimately, the donor class gets what it wants. The voters don't. That's how the Republican Party works.
So we really desperately need, we were talking about this off air, we desperately need our own billionaires that are actually God-fearing human beings. That's what we need.
And we don't have them.
We don't have them.
We don't have effective ones. We have a few who are on our side, but they're not effective in any way. They don't know how to use their money and power correctly, and they get caught up in weird beefs between each other. They're just not effective. Young right-wing men need to stop focusing on writing political philosophy books and reading political philosophy and getting into arcane theology debates with people. Stop doing that bullshit. It's what you need to become is a multimillionaire, then 100 millionaire, and then a billionaire. You need to control a strategic industry in the United States that's important to the United States. And then you'll be able to dictate policy and tell the government that it can't mutilate kids. That's how power actually works in the Western world. We are actually ruled by a plutocratic oligarchy. We're not ruled by elected officials. You could change out the entire Congress, the president, and every judge in the federal government, and it wouldn't change the policies of the federal government one iota, because the oligarchy controls the agencies, and the agencies are what run the government. So the oligarchy gets what it wants. Now, I think we are in the middle of a time of change. So most of my life, we've been ruled by a financial oligarchy out of Wall Street. And we used to talk about Wall Street versus Main Street. And what we meant was the ruling oligarchy versus the voters, right? That's been the sort of two categories we've used. But what's happened in my lifetime is a new oligarchy emerged on the West Coast, the tech oligarchs. Those oligarchs are in the process of taking over the country. And so there's a contest of power between Wall Street oligarchs and tech oligarchs, and they're trying to figure out who's going to run what. So there is some opportunity for change here. And but I think our people just need to be more attuned to this fact that electoral politics are not the future for change. Okay, you have to acquire, this is a plutocratic oligarchic society in the West. You have to acquire money and power, then you can influence things. Your vote is not going to influence things the way you think it will. It can on a local level, it can on specific issues. I vote in every election because of that. For example, I'm supporting Ken Paxton in the next election. I think that will make a difference locally. But you can't make the big systemic changes that you need unless you just have massive money power.
I think you're seeing that right now with the SAVE Act. I mean, here on
Yes.
this program, we actually exposed last Friday, as a matter of fact. We interviewed a guy by the name of Dr. Andrew Paquette, who was sent files from Bexar County, Texas, where there's an algorithm that was being used to essentially alter ballots, create fake ballots. And to the point, this was not just going on in Bexar County. This was going on all over the county because of John Cornyn, because of the amount of money involved. I think it's he said that it's safe to say, it's a fact that we really don't know who won that primary. It's unknowable. But I think you and I can, into it that Paxton probably won handily, maybe even got 50%, who knows.
Yes.
and a 50% plus one. And so now we had this whole debate last week. But the elections are still rigged, okay? If they can be when enough money is involved and somebody wants to put their freedom at risk. But then we had this whole thing. Okay, Trump's going to endorse Cornyn. Trump's going to endorse Paxton. Paxton says, "Well, I'll drop out if you get the SAVE Act passed." But if you actually look at it, all of the fraud that Dr. Paquette has reported on is happening after people present their photo ID. And so it's really interesting how this is really all theater. I mean, I think voter ID, Indian mail-in ballots are really good, by the way. And I think that would go a long way in a lot of instances to help. But if you're not going to tackle the electronic voting machines where we're letting third-party proprietary software that we don't have a right to look at pick our leaders is insane. It's absolutely nuts. But so to your point about how it's a plutocracy, and then you've got Senator Tommy Tuberville saying, "Hey, look, because of this Venezuela connection in the software," he goes on record and says there's people in D.C. who wouldn't be there. These Republicans or their donors have got to know that actually getting secure elections is a big problem because Republican primaries have been rigged in all likelihood, just like national and Democrat versus Republican general elections have been rigged.
The primaries are more rigged. The primaries are more rigged. They're more important than the general election. So look, the compromise that I call it a compromise, but it was imposed on us. But this electoral compromise between the donor class and the voters kind of works like this. The donors determine who's acceptable for the voters to present to them. It could be candidates in a primary. It could be a Democrat and a Republican for president. They will both be acceptable to the donor class. And the voters are allowed to pick which one of those, right? But they're not allowed to select someone who's not acceptable to the donor class. That's not allowed. And the primaries are where they stop that, right? I ran for office here in Texas in House District 63. It's a very small House district. The governor, the Speaker of the House, and a number of liberal donors, when we tallied it all up, they spent almost $4 million against me in this little bitty House district. They're simply not going to allow people who understand how the system really works into electoral office unless they're obedient, right? So you're never going to get a choice out of the primaries, or very rarely. Trump would be a rare exception. Ken Paxton is a rare exception. We get these upstarts. And the way you can always tell is the massive reaction by the donor class. Cornyn has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars against Ken Paxton. In the primary, not in the general, and in a primary election. And they did that because Paxton is just not in their club. So occasionally you can get someone, and that's when voting really matters. But you're right. Like, if we don't control who counts the votes and how the votes are counted, nothing matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you mentioned their opposition to Paxton has got to be one of the many reasons, would be, like you said, he's already researched Texas law. He's given an attorney general opinion saying that transing children is already child abuse. Whether a doctor says it's medical treatment or not doesn't matter. It's already child abuse. Now, we're also seeing the detransitioners start to win some lawsuits. Okay, so the financial incentive is at least starting to erode away, as these barbaric doctors who are realizing that the massive amount of profits that they make from ruining a child's life could come back to bite them in the end. Do you have any hope that the financial incentive going away would cause this practice to go away? And then also, generally speaking, can I just ask you, why in the world do you think the donors want transing kids to be a new part of American society? Like, what in their minds makes this a good and moral thing to do? I mean, I know that's a loaded question, but feel free to just please.
No, there's an answer to that question. Well, I'll answer your first question. Do I think that the financial disincentives from lawsuits are going to stop hospitals from doing these procedures? I do not. And what I predict is that left-wing states like Washington, Oregon, California will simply give hospitals immunity from lawsuits for doing these procedures. So I don't think in the long term that's going to be a fix. These procedures have to be determined to be felony child sexual abuse at federal law. That is the only way you're going to eradicate it. Now, to your second question about why the donors want to do it, there's a long-term program in the United States to destroy the political power of the American middle class. Why is that? Why is the American middle class so important worldwide that everybody wants to destroy its political power? It's just very simple. Anybody who's done any traveling internationally will absolutely know this. Nobody in the world believes in free speech other than the American middle class. Let's look at America. Does the donor class believe in free speech? No, they're the ones that are implementing the censorship algorithms against conservatives on all the social media platforms. Do the lower classes on welfare in America believe in free speech? No, they don't. They all benefit from DEI programs, and so they want speech curtailed. Do Canadians believe in free speech? No, they think it's a positive evil. Free speech is actually a positive evil to them. Do they have free speech in the UK? No. France? No. Germany? No. Italy? No. There's no free speech anywhere in the world except in America, and the only people that believe in keeping it are the American middle class. How about gun rights? In America, who believes in gun rights? Does the donor class believe in gun rights? No, they're constantly financing gun bills. They're constantly financing red flag commissions, anything they can do to curtail gun rights. Do the lower classes believe in gun rights? No, because first of all, most of them can't possess firearms, and they have internalized false ideas about threats to firearms in their communities. Can you possess firearms in Canada? No. UK? No. Germany? No. France? No. China? No. There's no place in the world that you have gun rights. How about rights from unreasonable searches and seizures? Do you have that in America? Yes. Does the donor class want that? No. They want to be able to invade your bank account, determine what you spend your money on. They got the Patriot Act to do all this stuff. They always pass it under national security grounds. You can't transfer large sums of money anymore. You can't have you can't keep cash anymore. The lower classes don't care because they don't really have bank accounts. So it's only the middle class that cares. How about unreasonable search and seizure in Canada? Look what happened to the protesters in Canada. They had their bank accounts seized. Their houses were taken without warrant. They lost everything with no due process whatsoever. How about in the UK? There's more people in prison in the UK for so-called social offenses. This means like doing a protest against illegal immigration. There are more people in prison in the UK than the total imprisonment of people for political action in Russia. Think about that, just the UK. You don't have any rights to privacy anywhere in Europe. You don't have it in China, nowhere in the world. So it's only the American middle class that still believes in the traditional political ideas that the Constitution was founded on. So the donor class knows that in order to get what it wants, which is a kind of globalist system in which there's no financial privacy, no personal privacy, in which most property is rented, it's not owned. In order
I want to interrupt you for a second. Slavery. For the donor class
yes.
to enslave the middle class and by extension the entire world, they have to take
yes.
out the American middle class. Keep going, please. You're on a roll.
Yeah. And in order to break the political power of the middle class, they identified, there's a great book you can get called The Authoritarian Personality. And it was written in the 1950s. And it's a detailed study about what causes someone to be conservative. And it was written by Frankfurt School philosophers and psychologists. And they used Freudian psychology to come up with ideas about how do you break down conservative families, and how do you prevent the rise in society of conservative people? So how do you stop children from becoming conservative? And they came up with a plan to disrupt the American family. A large part of it is pushing LGBT issues. It means pushing postmodern ideas so that people understand their religion in a different way. It means pushing multiculturalism so that you can never have any kind of national identity. All these things weaken people, right? And when people become demoralized, meaning, I don't mean this in the sense of feeling bad. When I say demoralized, what they mean is actually removing morals from the calculus of action, is what they call it. So you don't rely on morality to determine what you're going to do. That's a demoralized person. They're literally, morals are removed from their decision making. When a person is demoralized, it turns out you can't understand the world. It turns out that moral systems are how we actually understand and interpret the world. And so you can easily sway and propagandize and overcome a population that has morals that have been removed from its society. And that's been the principle that they've been operating on. It's a long-term thing they've been trying to implement since the late 50s.
Wow. That is so well said. And it really is, it really kind of paints the picture on how we are teetering on the edge of this cliff, because we know the wealthy class doesn't care. You meant, the lower class, like you said, benefits from the DEI, the handouts, the welfare, but the American middle class. Now, there used to be a time when both parties would say, hey, the middle class is shrinking. This is a problem. But what you're saying is that benefits the donor class, but they want it to shrink because it's the middle class that understands the benefits of freedom. And really what you just said about free speech, I love how you went through, basically the Bill of Rights there. But the freedom of speech is the one where we can most clearly see right now how Europe has abandoned it. And to think that it's only the middle class that really values these things, we are really surrounded right now. I mean, this is...
And remember, immigrants don't believe in free speech or gun rights. These H-1B immigrants, these Indian immigrants that have come here second and third generation, they don't believe in any of these constitutional ideas, by and large.
What do you mean, Jeff? What do you mean?
Either.
You mean America's soil isn't magic, and people that come here don't just, are you saying anybody can't be an American? Because we've been told our whole lives anybody can be an American.
Yeah, this is one of the most foolish ideas, and it is, unfortunately, it's deeply embedded in Enlightenment assumptions about the world. It's based on the tabula rasa view of human beings. But, look, a culture is not something that you can adopt. You don't adopt a culture. A culture adopts you, right? A culture is a set of shared stories which contain deeply held beliefs about the world, okay? If you don't have those deeply held beliefs as revealed in human practices and long-standing customs and traditions, if you're coming from a society with different customs and traditions and different stories about what the world is like, you're not participating in that culture. And that American culture, which created the yeoman farmer class, which led to the American middle class in the industrial age, that is the only one that believes in the American understanding of freedom, that comes from these shared stories and shared customs and traditions. And you can't just step into a tradition, okay? It doesn't work that way. The tradition has to adopt you, not the other way around.
Wow. We got about 5 minutes. Can you tell me where this goes from here? The point of this story is that you're fighting the results of this donor class wanting transition surgery for kids. Your ex-wife is now trying to officially, with a government document, and I read the document, and it clearly marks that you are a parent and you are not signing off on this. Several boxes are checked. This is a court battle. I'm assuming that you're going to try to fight again. And I don't know if you're still accepting donations for this legal battle. If you are, we want people to go and know where to donate. But what are you trying to do from here on out? I mean, fighting this battle.
So I just don't believe fundamentally that I'm going to succeed in the courts. The courts are basically controlled by the local oligarchies. California is not even a democracy. It's not even a republic. California is basically a kind of elected dictatorship. So the courts are completely controlled by the governor and by the attorney general. The courts just rule however they want. And they're controlled largely also by the tech oligarch class. The law firm that I went against in federal court in California was Google's law firm, Morris Forrester. Their website is actually mofo.com. I'm not making that up.
Wow.
And then, one of their lawyers sent me an email with some verbiage in it. And a few days later, the court issued an order with the same. They just copied it from the email from the lawyer. Like they just do whatever the oligarchs want. So I don't anticipate winning there. Instead, what I'm focusing on is shutting down these gender clinics. I successfully shut down the LA gender clinic, the largest gender clinic in the world. My son was in that clinic, and that stopped him from being chemically castrated for a while. I participated in shutting down the one in Boston, which is the second largest in America. I'm working on the one in San Francisco right now. So everywhere my son goes, I'm going to shut down these clinics. And hopefully I can just delay this until he's 18. And when he's 18, I'm allowed to have contact with him. And hopefully I can have some effect on him. I'm actually just not looking to get money from people anymore. I would just very much rather people begin to see how power is actually exercised and that the Republican Party is captured by these the donor class. I mean, to me, this is the most morally obvious question since slavery, that you can't castrate little kids. The Republican Party was founded to end slavery, and it can't stop kids from being castrated. Like, that should tell you something is deeply wrong. So I would just like your listeners, instead of giving me money, to maybe spend an afternoon, on Saturday or Sunday after church, thinking about why that is and what they can do about it.
Amen. Amen, brother. We've got a lot of work to do, and God bless you, and your testimony, your attitude should. Whatever you think's going on in your life that's bad, and I know there's a gradient scale here, look at Jeff Younger's attitude, his happy warrior attitude in the midst of something that is, I think most people out there's worst nightmare. So Jeff Younger, sir, thank you so much for coming on the program, and I have to have you back on to continue this discussion about the attack on the middle class and what we can do about it.
Happy to come back and talk to you. It was really great to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Back here in just a moment.
I'm Brian Norris, retired Army First Sergeant, husband to Kelly, father of 3 amazing girls, and a lifelong Arkansan who puts faith, family, and fair elections first. When Independence County demanded real election transparency, I led the charge, petitioning voters and winning at the Arkansas Supreme Court. Now, Little Rock bureaucrats are punishing counties like Searcy for putting voters first. That's not real conservatism. It's big government overreach in disguise. That's why Trump allies like General Michael Flynn, Mike Lindell, Justice Michael Gableman, Colonel Conrad Reynolds, Senator Wendy Rogers, and Senator Mark Finchem back me. Together, we'll secure Arkansas's elections and inspire the nation. As Secretary of State, I'll implement President Trump's executive order, verify citizenship, replace hackable voting computers, and build trust with verifiable paper ballots. I'll cut red tape for businesses, harness our natural gas and lithium boom, and attract tech jobs to grow Arkansas strong. This is our fight, our future. Join us.
Paid for by Norris for Arkansas.
Behind every precious life, there was a choice. Behind every family moment, behind every special memory, there was a choice. A life of joy. A life that is beautifully and wonderfully made. At 7 Weeks Coffee, we are funding the pro-life movement, one cup at a time. Will you let your coffee serve a greater purpose?
All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for being with us. Just know, once again, we can't do the program without you watching, and we very much appreciate it. We're broadcasting live from the state of Arkansas, and we just spoke with Jeff Younger. And I'm reading the comments. You guys get exactly what I was saying. I mean, it is a sick world that we live in. I completely agree. We have big problems. We have big battles yet that we have to face, and we have to win. We have to win these battles. And so, hats off to Jeff Younger, and I really meant what I said. His attitude, his peace during what is a trial, his suffering. Anybody out there who's a parent, you understand. Again, it's like your worst nightmare. The worst thing you could imagine is having one of your children be transed against your will, against your wishes. And so he is doing what any father would do. But I don't think most would have the type of calmness and peace that he does, and it's something that is clearly supernatural, in my opinion. I really believe that. The stuff that Jeff Younger said in that interview about the donor class, specifically the Republican Party donor class, has to be addressed. We have to admit it. The pushback that we're seeing for the SAVE Act, the reason it's not getting passed is because the donors don't want it to be passed. They don't want secure elections. They don't really want. I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, if secure elections will more accurately reflect the will of the people on a consistent basis, not to say that it'll eliminate all cheating. Nobody could say that, because there's still going to be people, even with paper ballots, that'll try to cheat. But it'll be a lot harder, as I've said, in this age of AI, that if somebody's going to cheat, we need to make sure the person that's doing it is not some computer algorithm or piece of software, that the person is doing it has a soul, that we have a better chance of holding that person accountable. So, it is something that we have to grapple with, and it's disgusting. But the issue that I brought up during the interview is slavery. I mean, that's the issue here. It's also what I have said about the lack of accountability so far, right? And I understand, like, we're still waiting on a grand jury that was impaneled in Florida, about potentially this grand conspiracy to frame Donald Trump for treason and blame the Russians. And but I will just say this: like, if we get to the end of Donald Trump's second term and none of these intel oligarchs have been held accountable and gone to jail, then that would mean that our vote, even electing President Trump, it'll mean that our vote really doesn't matter, and it kind of means that we aren't free, doesn't it? Doesn't that kind of mean that we're not free, or at least within the system of government that we have? And so that's really what's at stake here, and that's what's at stake. I mean, what Jeff said at the end there, this is the most common sense issue to deal with since slavery, and yet our own Republican Party has people that are donating to it that are for transing kids. Now, hear me. If it were up to me, I mean, if I were emperor, transition surgeries would be illegal for minors, but also for non-minors. I mean, for everybody. I have no problem banning something. I believe banning things is good sometimes. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. That's what I believe. Didn't used to believe that. When I was much younger and in my libertarian phase of life, I didn't subscribe to that. I subscribed to the live and let live, Stay out of this, stay out of that. Generally, I think that can be good, but it's really only good if you have a moral and decent people. If live and let live among an immoral, wicked society, as we're watching the re-paganization, actually the paganization of our society, you could say a re-paganization of the West in general, if you consider ancient Rome West, and then you go to you go to Constantine, which Christianized things, and Now in that sense, we are being re-paganized. But if live and let live, folks, if that means that we have to live with abusing children, mutilating children, pumping them full of drugs, and calling that health care, I'm done. Count me out. And I think most of you out there are too. So I think it's wild though. Like the SAVE Act, President Trump. Now I think I kind of realize. By the way, and I wish Rob were here. Maybe Rob's listening. Now I kind of feel like after that Jeff Younger interview where he's saying that there's an allergy to banning childhood mutilation surgeries. Now I think I understand why it's been put in the SAVE Act. Now I think I understand why. And they're doing everything they can to not vote, to maneuver to where they don't really have to vote on either of these issues, the SAVE Act and the banning childhood surgeries for minors. So back in May of last year, back in May of 2025, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against a Korean sauna. The Korean sauna had an issue. The issue was they didn't want a female sauna to have to put up with men who claim they're women causing dangling problems. That's the only way I can describe it, and you'll understand why that's the only thing that can come to mind here in a minute, because it's recently made the rounds that the minority opinion, so it was a 2-1 decision. 2-1 says the Korean female spa has to allow naked men who think they're women to walk around naked and make all of the women feel uncomfortable. Now, can you imagine that? Can you imagine if you are a female and you are working your job at a spa that is for women? It's a women-only space, and all of a sudden a man who pretends to be a woman but is still anatomically, hasn't gone through the surgery. Can you imagine the shock and the horror, really just the embarrassment, how uncomfortable that you would be, having a man all of a sudden walk around naked and you just have to be okay with it. And so then you take it to the courts because, you ban the practice and then you get sued. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rules with the trans folks, rules with the LGBTQ, RST, LNE, would you like to buy a Val community? And now you're stuck with this issue. What would you do? So about 6 hours ago, let me actually, we're going to go with the headline first. Talking Points Memo posted this story right here. Hang on one second. Am I serious? Are we to believe? Hang on one second. I have an issue where my screen is not showing. Now that's frustrating. Hang on one second. I could potentially fix this problem, but I am not sure if I can fix this problem. Hang on one second. I've got to go to a setting here, and hopefully we can make this work. Real quick, let's see. Okay, it worked that part. Did it work this part? No, it did not. Okay, well, we're going to have to do this without, because I can't fix this issue without shutting down all of my software. So here we go. You're going to have to take my word for it. Talking Points Memo says that there's a judge that drafted the minority opinion in this Ninth Circuit case. Headline, Trump judge says trans rights case is about, quote, swinging dicks, berates woke colleagues. Now, the San Francisco Chronicle ran a different headline. They were very upset about it. Their headline, quote, a Trump-appointed judge used a vulgar term to attack trans women. His colleagues hit back. So there's a 3-judge panel. It was a 2-1 decision, and you can go back. Let's go to the Linwood Times here. Let's see if this comes up. So this was back in March of last year. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Olympus Spa, a Linwood-based female-only Korean spa that requires patrons to be fully nude, cannot sue the Washington State Human Rights Commission on First Amendment grounds for requiring transgender women into its facilities. Okay, so that's I got the order of events a little wrong there, but you understand. So the minority opinion on this has now been released, or at least it's just now making the rounds. Peter St. Ongji, PhD, on X writes, the woke Ninth Circuit decides Korean spas have to let biological men swing their gear. See, he didn't even want to say it. Swing their gear in front of women and children. But the dissent is pure gold. So this was the dissent from one of the justices on that Ninth Circuit case. His name, hilariously, is Judge Van Dyke. He wrote the lead dissent, which begins this way, and I quote, sorry, my screen, for those of you who know, I cannot show you articles the rest of the show because, it's because for whatever reason, my software's not working, and in order to reset it, I'd have to end the stream, and I'm not going to do that to you guys. So here it is, quote, this is from the judge, Judge Van Dyke. He says, quote, this is a case, if you have kids in the room, okay, if you have kids in the room, we try to keep this a family show, but this is a news item, and he makes a point. There's a reason he uses this vulgar language. This is what the judge says, quote, this is a case about swinging dicks. The Christian owners of Olympus Spa, a traditional Korean women-only nude spa, understandably don't want them in their spa, meaning the swinging phalluses. He goes on, quote, their female employees and female clients don't want them in their spa either. But Washington State insists on them. And now, so does the Ninth Circuit. He goes on, you may think that swinging dicks shouldn't appear in a judicial opinion. You're not wrong. But as much as you might be understandably shocked and displeased to merely encounter that phrase in this opinion, I hope we can all agree that it is far more jarring for the unsuspecting and exposed women at Olympus Spa, some as young as 13, to be visually assaulted by the real thing. Not the phrase, swinging, but the real thing. He goes on, sometimes it feels like the supposed adults in the room have collectively lost their minds. Woke regulators and complicit judges seem entirely willing, even eager, to ignore the consequences that their Frankenstein social experiments expose on real women and young girls. Imagine that. Oh, hey, check this out. This one here is still working, so I can show you this one. Look, okay, so we at least have something. I've got some visual aid capability. I just don't have the other one. Can you believe this? There it is in writing. The Olympus Spa versus Armstrong Judge Van Dyke wrote this in his dissent, that this case is about swinging appendages, if you will. Swinging appendages. It's pretty insane. We've lost our minds. So yeah, our government, back to what I was saying, our government was meant for a moral people, and this is where live and let live, this is where your freedom breaks down. Because if there's no restraint, and this is where the government needs to come in and do its job and ban this stuff. The transanity doesn't end there. The Alliance for Defending Freedom, with this headline, but this is a positive. Indiana School District pays former music teacher $650,000 to settle a religious discrimination case. ADF attorneys represent John Klug in a favorable settlement after he was forced to resign for his religious convictions. Listen to this story. An Indiana school teacher agreed to pay Indiana School District agreed to pay $650,000 to settle a lawsuit. This is what happened. So Klug, this guy, he taught orchestra. So he's a musician. He taught orchestra, conducted orchestra, or band, as we call it in the South. And he also taught music theory. The high school was Brownsburg High School. And he did this for several years before the district mandated that he used terminology that violated his religious beliefs. He initially reached an agreement with school officials in 2017. What was the agreement? Well, he didn't want to call them, he didn't want to call somebody a he that's a her, or a her that's a him, or probably didn't even want to use their first name, like if they've changed their name from, Brandon to, I don't know, Julie or something. So he reached an agreement saying, okay, what if I just call them by their last name? Like a football coach does, Harrell, get over here, that sort of thing. And the school district said, you know what, that's fine. We'll let you do that. I mean, that's a happy medium. We're living in strange times. We will let you, Mr. Band Teacher, Mr. Hollins Opus, we will let you. Sorry. We will let you just call them by their last name. Okay, but that wasn't good enough. Because you know why? Students figured it out. Students figured it out that he was getting around their woke sex religion. They figured out that he had found a way to get around their compelled speech desires. Because that's what this is about. This is about compelling speech. It's more about that than it is religious freedom. But it is about religious freedom. And I think that's an error, and I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. But, you got to do what you got to do to restore sanity and protect people's rights. He says, but after a few students and teachers complained, Brownsburg announced a new policy that rejected all religious accommodations and revoked its accommodation for Klug and forced him to resign. The lawsuit argued that Brownsburg's actions violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, a federal law prohibiting discrimination against employees on the basis of religion. In light of the settlement, the parties filed a joint stipulation of dismissal Tuesday in Klug versus Brownsburg Community School Corporation. Alliance Defending Freedom is the alliance building. Okay, so there you have it. So this guy eventually lost. He tried his darndest. I'm sorry, the school district eventually lost. This guy eventually won. He tried his darndest to just call them by their last name, but it wasn't good enough for the trans mafia. And now he's $650,000 richer. Good for him. But let me tell you why I think some of this stuff, and I get it, you got to fight in the courts, you got to fight with jurisprudence. The same thing applied to the cake maker. This was the same issue with the florists. You guys remember this? The cake baker. Bake me a homosexual cake, or bake me a cake for my gay wedding. And I can't do that. I'm sorry. I can't bake you a cake. You're gonna have to find somebody else. I don't. It's not a biblical marriage. I can't affirm that. I'm not going to use my services for something I think is wrong and evil and goes against God's design, goes against my religious convictions. So, in the olden days, before we got our brains scrambled by the civil rights movement, what did the civil rights movement do? It effectively just banned the freedom of association. Now, we can sit here and say racism is wrong, discrimination is wrong. We can say all of those things in principle. We can say that, a Christian society eventually comes out of that, and I really do believe it was kind of on its way out anyway. But no, we get the Civil Rights Act, which totally redoes the relationship between citizen and government in a giant way. The Civil Rights Act said you do not have the right of freedom of association. You're going to have to, everybody's got to associate with everybody. They took that right away. It just is what it is. Now, you may agree with that. You may think that was good, but it fundamentally brought us to this point where, because of the Civil Rights Act and because of the history behind it, now every group that claims to be marginalized tries to get the entire country emotionally to accept that their plight is the exact same plight as is black people in the 1950s and 60s, which is ridiculous. It's like not even the same thing. Number one, until the trans thing happened, most of the time you could look at somebody and you didn't know whether they were gay or straight. Obviously, with the trans thing, it's kind of obvious. When you've got the Adam's apple and you've got the purple wig on, we kind of know what you're doing now. We can kind of say, okay, you're one of those. It is a little bit more obvious now. But still, it's pretty ridiculous. But it conditioned our country to like, okay, we solved this problem, which, by the way, we didn't solve. People still have disagreements. I dare say people in this country still have disagreements based on race. Barack Obama, we can thank for that one. Yeah, that was a balloon that just got popped. That got busted. All right, so we are conditioned to believe this way. And because of that, we are now having to accept immorality as the baseline and fight for our rights based on religious freedom or, in this case, it was religious freedom or freedom of speech, compelled speech. You can't compel me to use your transgender name. We're having to fight on the Bill of Rights thing where before all of this, before we got to the point here, this 20th and 21st century idea, a judge would have looked at this case and said, homosexuality is statutorily banned in our country, and so of course you don't have to bake the cake. The judge would throw out the lawsuit on its face because of that right there. Do you see how we've changed? Do you see how our whole argumentation is now shifted? And don't get me wrong, I'm supportive of fighting for your religious freedom or my religious freedom or whatever. I am. But in the olden days, it wouldn't have even been a discussion because you wouldn't have had this Overton window over here that's like, well, where's the next marginalized group? Where's the next marginalized group that's being treated like black people because of the color of their skin in the 50s and 60s? You wouldn't even have that. You wouldn't have that. Texas's anti-sodomy law wasn't overturned by the United States Supreme Court until 2001. Now, nobody was enforcing it, but for some reason, I just want to point out just how severely this country doesn't even look like at all what it used to be. And so we now are in the courts, and we get bullied by people who are participating in moral insanity, and we have to go into court to stick up for our rights when we are actually battling somebody who doesn't have the moral high ground at all because they're arguing for a lifestyle that is fundamentally on a path to hell, right? And not coincidentally, that's one of the reasons our whole society now looks like it's on a path to hell and destruction. So it's something to think about. We got a great rest of the show for you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, the candidate challenging Lindsey Graham in South Carolina in the South Carolina primary, the election is June the 9th. We're going to be talking to Mark Lynch. He joins us here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back in a minute.
The Arkansas political swamp is in total meltdown. And what do? Spew lies. Why? Because of a 21-year retired Army veteran, a decorated war hero, father, a proven leader in communities who puts Arkansans first, who won't sell out, won't take a knee to the Arkansas political swamp machine. You say you want change, well then vote for it. Then vote Brian Norris for Arkansas Secretary of State.
All right, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. So you guys have heard me talk about him. Mainly, you've heard me talk about our next guest because we keep doing our Graham Watch segments where we're, highlighting how Lindsey Graham is a warmonger. And I always, anytime I talk about Lindsey Graham in my litany of disagreements with him, I talk about his primary challenger, businessman, Republican Mark Lynch. He is challenging Lindsey Graham, who is perhaps, if RINOs had a mascot, it would, of course, be Lindsey Graham. Mark Lynch joins us now. Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's great to be back again.
Yes, sir. So first off, tell me, how is the campaign going? I know a campaign like this, you're probably traveling all over the state of South Carolina. You're at meetings. I would imagine you're hearing what we hear nationally, especially here in my home state of Arkansas. People are tired of Lindsey Graham. He's been around much too long, and he really doesn't represent I don't think he represents conservatives in any way, and I would imagine South Carolinians feel the same.
Yeah, I guess, really we owe a special thank you to Senator Graham because he's helping our campaign tremendously because he's imploding himself and God's flushing him. This is the year, Paul, 2026, and our great nation's 250th anniversary of our birth as an awesome country. We're going to remove a traitor. I know he's a RINO. He's actually, a communist traitor, whatever. Everything he's doing is not anything but Lindsey first. And everybody is tired of him. And our polling's increasing and Lindsey's dropping. And we're going to do this thing. And this is the winning campaign. And I want all of Americans that are kind of conservative in their betting or waiting to see how a candidate's doing. We're doing it. Now's the time to join us in this great fight at the grassroots level and remove a traitor in this exciting year.
Well, I certainly agree with you, and I know the audience agrees with you. Every time we do any kind of segment highlighting Lindsey Graham's madness, the comments are just off the charts. I mean, people want this guy gone. He has recently, obviously, he finally got his wish, right? The United States, and we pray for our troops. The United States is finally engaged in a conflict, a war with Iran. And of course, I wasn't a fan of doing it, but now that we're here, it's we just hope that our troops stay safe and accomplish their goals and get back home. But Lindsey, you've got President Trump who says, hey, this is going to be a short incursion. And yet Lindsey is trying to escalate things with Lebanon. Lindsey wants the United States, to bomb Cuba, it sounds like. And now he's even been criticizing Spain because Spain isn't for another forever war in the Middle East. I would imagine that all of those things are unpopular, and that's why you're seeing him dip in the polls.
Right. I mean, everybody's asking, is he the president? He's wearing the cap of the United States President, Donald Trump. He wears the cap of Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War, and our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He's going and negotiating like he did back in the Ukraine with Zelensky while Trump was trying to promote diplomacy to bring peace between Putin and Zelensky. And Lindsey's promoting more and more wars. And, everybody's tired of it this week in some of his craziness, madness, just sick war lust. He talks about it, we're going to go back to South Carolina and bring our sons and daughters over here to the Middle East. And I hate to tell him, but we're not going to allow you to have the blood of our children spilled for your pocketbook ever again. And South Carolina's done with Lindsey Graham, and we're tired of it. We're bankrupt as a company. This war is costing us, they were projecting at the beginning of $1.5 billion a day. And we're starting to lose men now. It's getting serious, and we're not seeing a ending anytime soon. And Lindsey's going to go ahead and line up other countries' wars and get us into Cuba, like you said, and more things. And, it's dangerous what he's doing, just like Trump said this last summer with Lindsey in the Ukraine. You better be watching out what you're saying and running your mouth because you don't have any business in that position. And that brought up the Logan Act that he's in violation of. That's not his position as a U.S. Senator for South Carolina.
No, you're exactly right. I also think, what's interesting, I've got pulled up on the screen here. This is a clip that surfaced, I guess it was posted on March, but I believe it's an old clip where, and correct me if I'm wrong, where, he's on Sean Hannity's show, supposed to be talking, I think, about, South Carolina recovering from a national disaster. And I'm going to play this clip for you. And so he talks about the national disaster, but then immediately starts talking about where his real focus is, which is a foreign country. People are watching this now and seem to be taking offense to it. Let me play it for you. 1 second.
Elon Musk for that. You know, I've been going all over South Carolina like most people. I hadn't slept much. But look what's going on in Israel. Our friends in Israel are surrounded by people that want to kill them, destroy them, a second Holocaust in the making. And Biden says be proportional. What is the proportional response to people who want to kill you and your family?
God. So what do you make of that? People are pulling these old clips where even when he's on to talk about you know his own citizens suffering, it's like his attention immediately goes to foreign conflicts.
Exactly, and I thank the people for bringing up these old clips, because we need to remember and put together all the clips, because they're all saying the same thing, and it helps us to remember who he really is. And his voting record proves it. Is 57% constitutionally. He's failing South Carolina, failing Americans, stabbing Trump in the back every chance he gets. And he's running his own, it's like his own country. And so he didn't care about South Carolina, the current news and the state he represents. He went right over to the national news for the next war he's talking about, helping get started and getting funded by the military industrial complex companies of Boeing and Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know about that. It does seem that he prioritizes defense contractors, and really just the lobbyists that he works for. You know, I mean, it was uncovered back when President Trump first got in his second term, and they started gutting USAID. I know there was some USAID program or some organization for senators or something that he was the chair of. I mean, and there is this scam that's been going on for a long time with non-governmental organizations that, just like bills in Congress, they do the complete opposite of what they say. Non-governmental organizations tend to just be fronts for our intel oligarchy. And then, they get money, and then they're expected to tithe, just like the Somali fraud. They get this government money, which is really taxpayer money. Then they're expected to tithe a portion of that back to, the deep state's, the deep state's priorities, whether it's a political campaign or whether it's, to enact a color revolution against the people of this country. What were your thoughts on all of that? Go ahead.
Well, everything's corrupt, and, even including the Epstein files. And we've got an attorney general that gave us that list February a year ago, and nothing's been done about that. It's finally starting, it looks like, but I hope we'll finish. America is furious that we're not arresting people, and we're just watching the same news story night after night, going into a year now and all these things. And we've got to get godly people back into Congress again, running this country, so we can start doing the right thing. Our founders came over here to worship the one true God, and we have God-given unalienable rights that we're endowed with. And our congressmen and senators like Lindsey Graham and me, when I get in, my only authority that really I have is to protect your God-given unalienable right, and make every decision I can through a biblical foundation and the Constitution, and honor my oath that I took to serve the people. Lindsey's arrogant. He's got a different attitude. He does whatever he wants to do by himself. South Carolinians all over the state are saying we haven't heard from him. He hasn't been in our counties for over a year, and nobody calls us back. We know he's busy, but his staff doesn't even return calls. And so he's disconnected, and he doesn't care, and people are tired of it. Paul, I mean, it's time for change, and citizens here are so thrilled that they have a viable candidate in me. I'm an ordained deacon. I'm a successful businessman, and the polling shows they prefer a businessman over another career politician or an attorney. And that's who I am. And people have asked me to run because I have fruit in my life. I can show you what I've done in my life with our business and at church and our family and our children. And I have the character qualities that God requires of a deacon, and we'll bring that into the United States Senate. And there won't be corruption. It'll just be easy because we'll do the right thing, under my leadership.
Look,
and I'll help the people follow.
What you just said is such a breath of fresh air. First of all, generally, your statement I would just file under you have a biblical fear of God, and that's how I try to raise my child. In the fear and admonition of the Lord. That's how my parents tried to raise me. You would never hear Lindsey Graham ever reference what the type of biblical worldview that you just referenced. And I think a lot of times, this is our problem. DC is godless. You brought up Epstein. It's safe to say that blackmail is a currency in Washington, D.C. But, specifically when it comes to things like insider trading, Mark Lynch, let's think about this for a second. I keep, I'm supportive generally of legislation that would keep our Congress people from, being able to make a bunch of money in the stock market because they get information that nobody else has, right? But then I think about how is that even practical? Because even if you put something in place that has teeth, what's stopping Lindsey Graham, from telling his friend or whatever, I don't know, some other politician that has a family, what's stopping somebody from telling their brother-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner, what they need to, where they need to put their money? You get to a point where government, if you've got an immoral people governing you, you get to a point where the laws are not going to be able to restrain them, and we're certainly to that point. It would be much easier having men of character with a fear of God, meaning they know they're going to be held accountable, and they don't want to sin, they don't want to harm their neighbor, they want to love God. It would be much easier to have more people like that would know, what, getting rich off of my position is wrong and morally reprehensible. So I say all that to say we need more Mark Lynches to not only run, we need you to win, because we're to the point where more laws actually, we're depraved, and we're going to find a way. We're going to find a way to go around those laws. What do you think about that?
Right. We're infiltrated to the hilt with corruption and evil people and enemies of our nation, as we're seeing from Somalians and all running Minnesota. And I'm glad Mike Lindell's put his name in the hat to run for governor and help clean that up. These guys that get in authority positions of sheriff and city administrator, and they run county council all the way down to the local levels like that, and then at the state level with their governor, and then we've got them in Congress. And so they're all just tied up. And, I've signed the United States Term Limits Pledge, and I hate we have to do that, because when this country was founded, we didn't have to worry about that. Men had integrity, and they went and served when they were called by their local community or township or state to run for governor or president or whatever they did. And they did their service, and then they came back home to their families. They didn't make it a career, because it wasn't a thing to try to get rich in an office serving the people. And, like Trump, I don't need any money. I'm not going to be bought out. People ask me, one of the biggest questions is will you take money from AIPAC? I won't take a penny from AIPAC. We're a sovereign nation. I work for the United States citizens when I get in that office, and I will serve you. And we make our own decisions. We've got to pull out of the United Nations and not listen to a 57% majority or whatever it is of Islamic terrorist nations telling Americans what we have to do in a new world order. So the way we end the corruption is get rid of the corrupt people. And so I hope we get term limits in till we can clean it out again. And if we ever get men back that have true courage and backbone, and they'll hold up to the Constitution and enforce our laws of this land, we've got to have term limits to get rid of them. We can't get them out. In our state, Paul, is an open primary. On June 9th, when my primary happens, Democrats can come in and upset the results of Republican elections because we don't have party registration. It's crazy.
Yep.
And it's hard to get that done because the majority of our state house, the only way they got in is because Democrats helped them get elected.
No, you're right. And that's a huge problem. Open primaries are a huge problem in my home state of Arkansas. We cannot get the establishment here to give us closed primaries, even though county committees are asking for it. It's really, really, really sad. And I think that gets to my next question about the donor class and really, just the RNC in general, and how I think a lot of county committees are saying, hey, look, this is our party. And then the top-down RNC says, nope, that the party actually belongs to us. Earlier in the show, Mark Lynch, we were talking to Jeff Younger, who's fighting his ex-wife, who was allowed to take his kids to California to trans his son against his will. And we had a long conversation about how the donor class, specifically of the Republican Party, actually doesn't want to make it illegal to trans kids and mutilate them, as President Trump rightfully calls it, mutilation, and just how frustrating this is. I mean, we are now, the Congress is trying to pass the SAVE Act, and they don't want to, but they're also not doing common sense things like banning the genital mutilation of children. It's absolutely insane that we can't get something as basic as that done. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And right now in our state, Lindsey's sending out direct mail pieces here that it's campaign season. We're 90 days away or whatever. And he's talking about how he did the right thing, and all these judges he picked out and confirmed the appointments of all the conservative judges. Back at the first of President Trump's term this time, he signed an executive order to reverse the ability to have transgender child mutilation surgeries. And Judge Herson, the Judge Lindsey Graham confirmed of Biden's pick, reversed that order. So again, he's a liar and a traitor, and he's evil and wicked. And we can't change the sex God assigned to us. And it's just horrible when a child grows up and they're later 18 or 20 or 25, and their school or their parents or a divorced couple, one like Jeff Younger's wife had this done, and they wake up one day and realize I'm still the same sex I was, but I've mutilated my body. That's just the horrors. My heart breaks for him. That is the most powerless position to be in if you see that go down with your kids from an ex-spouse. I can't imagine.
I can't either. Matter of fact, we were talking to him about that, and we were just, he credits the Lord. He credits God with giving him the patience. I think like he's the most patient father in all of the world at this moment, honestly. Your website is lynchforsenate.com. That's lynchforsenate.com. We'll see a portion of there. Let me go full screen with that. So, folks, if you guys want to do something to put the D.C. swamp on notice, voting for Mark Lynch, if you're in South Carolina, is the obvious thing. But for this national audience, if you guys want to help somebody out, it takes money to run a campaign. You guys know that, especially when you're going up against somebody like Lindsey Graham, who is the RINO mascot. And I just want to reiterate, I want to tell the audience, Mark, that I know you're a successful businessman, but you believe so much in this mission, in this calling, that you took $5 million of your own retirement money and put it into your campaign. That is somebody who's serious. That's somebody who has skin in the game. And so I feel like when you ask people for money to support your campaign, I feel like that sets you apart from a lot of other candidates.
Right. We're the only candidate against Lindsey. There's a couple others. They don't have the finances in their campaign to be a serious candidate. I do. And we put that in there after reviewing with people, and my wife and I prayed about it, and we are committed to this. When I do something, I'm all in. This is a big leap of faith and a lot of work, but we're willing to do it. And I can't get to heaven one day and Jesus asked me, why didn't you run? We have the resources and the knowledge of the deep state and working with the national security people that are fighting the Islamic infiltration in America. And people are asking those questions now at stump meetings and different candidates. And I'm the only one that can talk about it because I work with an organization called Understanding the Threat with the highest level of intelligence about this subject, and working with General Mike Flynn, who's fully endorsed my campaign. That's an honor. And he believes in me, and we've got a lot of work to do. This country's in trouble. Everybody listen. We're going to win this thing, and the polls are shifting, and the numbers are going down for Lindsey, and they're coming up for me, and it's doable. join me and help us do this. This is the year we can finally get rid of a real traitor who only acts like a Republican during campaign season, but his voting record and everything he does proves who he really is. So I pray you'll help our campaign and check us out and pray for us. Amen. You know, God's going to show out this year. He's going to appoint a new U.S. Senator for South Carolina.
Amen. Mark Lynch, God bless you, sir, and we will be praying for you when you come to mind. Thank you so much for coming on the program. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul, and I appreciate what you're doing. It's awesome. Thank you for your show.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Folks, we're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a moment.
Behind every precious life, there was a choice. Behind every family moment, behind every special memory, there was a choice. A life of joy. A life that is beautifully and wonderfully made. At 7 Weeks Coffee, we are funding the pro-life movement, one cup at a time. Will you let your coffee serve a greater purpose?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show, LFA TV, other platforms watching. Hey, wherever you're watching this, I want you to like, share, subscribe the video, share it to your friends. We really would appreciate that. Broadcasting right now. On this Friday, we are live from my home state of Arkansas, the great state of Arkansas. And I am humbled that you guys are out there watching us, listening to us, reacting to us. You're welcome. R-Star says, thanks, Paul. You're welcome. We want to use this show to promote good things and primarying Lindsey Graham and letting you meet candidates like Mark Lynch who are doing, I mean, they're putting themselves out there. They're in the arena. They're fighting the fight. It's a big deal. So somebody like Lindsey Graham getting, I mean, if Lindsey Graham were to lose June the 9th, that would be a huge, huge win for the American people, for the people of South Carolina. Be a huge wound for the deep state and for the swamp. No question about that at all. So I've got you for the next 30 minutes before we hand it off to Secret America. And I've got a few things I want to talk about. First off, I'll say this: I didn't quite finish with this Ninth Circuit dissenting opinion. Everybody's picking it up. The story that I just gave you, it was kind of just a little. I guess Elon Musk maybe is the one that shined it, brought it forth because in the tweet, it was actually Elon Musk that is where I first saw it. Let me throw this up here. This one particular scene is still quite not acting right, so forgive me for the picture not quite being the way it needs to be. But it was Elon Musk that first brought this up. Woke Ninth Circuit decides Korean spa has to let biological men swing their appendages in there. And so people have now, they've gone and they've tracked down the judge who, in his dissenting opinion, if you're just joining us, I'm sure many of you already saw this, but he uses the term, the phrase, quote, swinging dicks in an effort to make you uncomfortable, but he wants you to understand how uncomfortable you are by the phrase versus how uncomfortable the women of the spa would be to actually have to see men walking around. So the guy's name is Judge Van Dyke, and Connor Couts says this judge who just blasted colleagues over allowing swinging appendages in a women's spa is the same judge who filmed a firearms demo in his chambers as part of a Second Amendment dissent last year. He was also Trump's 2020 shortlist for 20 potential Supreme Court nominees. So this was him on the Second Amendment.
Earlier, this little piece here it's necessary for the operation of the firearm. It's a tiny little piece that you need to have for the firearm. And so you would think, well, since it's necessary, then it must be an arm protected by the Second Amendment. But not under California's logic in this case. See, you can replace this factory takedown lever with a different factory takedown lever. This one's called a gas pedal. And when you do that, you replace it, you put the slide back on. Now the firearm is a lot more controllable under recoil. You can, just like with the red dot sight, you can do faster follow-up shots. You can aim the gun more quickly, and you can control it better. So again, as with the red dot sight, as with the higher capacity magazine, this particular takedown lever makes the gun more dangerous when it's misused, but also makes the gun more effective for its intended purpose when it's used properly. So under California's logic, because this is an accessory, this little takedown lever, it could be replaced with a worse part. This little takedown lever is not protected. It's not part of the arm protected by the Second Amendment. Well, you might ask yourself, well, what about the grip? Like, you think this grip, certainly it must be part of the arm. I mean, it seems like that's a pretty key part of a firearm, is the grip of a pistol. Well, actually, under the majority's argument, it would not be protected. And the reason is, here's a bunch of grips that I've accumulated over the years. I'm just going to pull a couple out here. This is a nice small grip, a nice small light grip. This is a big heavy grip. So what you can do on this firearm is you can remove the slide, remove that takedown lever, take what's called the fire control unit out of the firearm. This is actually the firearm under the ATF's definition. And you can take this fire control lever and you can put it inside this smaller grip. And you could use this grip for, say, self-defense purposes, because it's very concealable, it's light, it's easy to carry. And indeed, you'll see that's pretty much the type of grip that I have on my self-defense firearm. Or you could take this much heavier grip with aggressive stippling on it and with a flared mag well, and you could put this fire control unit in there, put the takedown lever on, and then you put the slide back on, and now you have a firearm that is much better at being able to take quick follow-up shots, hit what you're aiming at. And so this grip, all of these grips under the majority in California's logic, could be banned, because if they were misused, they would make the firearm more dangerous, and you could put a different type of grip on if you want.
So would any of those other two judges on the Ninth Circuit, would they know at all anything what he's talking about? No, of course not. They know nothing. This is a guy who is educated in firearms and would know how to rule on them in a reasonable way. And so it makes perfect sense. Honestly, it makes perfect sense why he wrote the swinging phallic comment in this dissent. Again, get to know that guy, Judge Lawrence Van Dyke, the left's worst nightmare on the Ninth Circuit there. Pretty wild stuff. In other news, breaking U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro just announced activist Judge Boasberg has blocked a grand jury from investigating the Federal Reserve. Obviously, this would be not just the Federal Reserve, it would also be Jerome Powell. By the way, whatever happened to auditing Fort Knox? Remember that? A year ago in March, we were hearing stories, hey, we need to check and see if the gold is in Fort Knox. That all kind of went away with Doge and Elon Musk, didn't it? Here is Jeanine Pirro. Listen to this.
Giving an update on the DOJ criminal investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Let's watch.
Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Now, the American public is fed up with public monies that seem to go into a black hole, especially in D.C., where no one is held accountable. One of the age-old tools that all prosecutors have to investigate any crime, including cost overruns, is a grand jury subpoena. Today, however, in Washington, an activist judge has taken that tool away from us by inserting himself and preventing the grand jury from even obtaining, let alone hearing evidence. He has neutered the grand jury's ability to investigate crime. As a result, Jerome Powell today is now bathed in immunity, preventing my office from investigating the Federal Reserve. This is wrong, and it is without legal authority. In June of 2025, Jerome Powell testified before the Senate Banking Committee, making, quote, questionable statements that did not comport with publicly available documents. And that was regarding the atrocious cost overrun of more than $1 billion. I didn't say million, I said billion, in renovations to his headquarters.
Billion with a B is $27,000 per day for 100 years, with money still left over. So to Judge Piro's point, $1 billion is the equivalent of spending $27,000 per day for 100 365-day years. Okay? Just so we're clear about how much money that is. It is a lot.
This from the man who says that he is the steward of our public funds. In November, the United States Attorney's Office began an inquiry. Prosecutors from my office gathered information for months before we served 2 grand jury subpoenas. On December 19th, we sent an email to the Federal Reserve to have a conversation, a meeting, or even a phone call to discuss our concerns. There was no response. On December 29th, we sent an email to have a conversation, a meeting, or even a phone call to discuss our concerns. Again, we were ignored. We, in fact, asked to meet the first week in January. We were ignored. It was at that point that 2 grand jury subpoenas were issued to the Federal Reserve, not even to Jerome Powell. Again, no response, no compliance, but instead a woe is me video by Mr. Powell falsely claiming that he was being threatened with criminal indictment. And claiming victim status, Powell proceeds to call his political friends in D.C. and around the world to gin up support for himself, all the while refusing to produce simple documents. Now enter local District Court Judge James Boasberg, whose written decision on its face makes clear his antipathy toward President Trump and this administration. He quashes both subpoenas, thereby prohibiting us from reviewing any records and precluding us from submitting records to the grand jury. That grand jury, of course, comprised of ordinary people. Ladies and gentlemen, no one is above the law.
Wow. So the Federal Reserve obviously is not a government agency, and I think that's what we're seeing right here. That this is not a government of laws. This is a government of a plutocracy, and there are just people that are above the law that are outside of the purview of the United States government. What even is the United States government? It is the bureaucracies, as Jeff Younger was saying earlier on the show. So, Federal Reserve is not a United States agency. It's a private bank. I mean, we know this. I mean, that was the probably one of the most early. It might have been the earliest conspiracy theory that was out there in the internet, in the interwebs way back in the day. You know, you have your JFK assassination. You got that conspiracy, and then it's like, hey, the Federal Reserve is actually trying to enslave the people by controlling our economy, making us think we're a free people, but we actually have no real freedom because they try to manipulate the stock market the way we set our thermostats at home. Like, we want 71 degrees in our house, we set it on 71. If they want this inflation or that inflation, or hey, if they want to cause a stock market collapse like in 1929, they have the power to do it. So Jerome Powell is overspending by $1 billion, which means there's $1 billion missing, is what our government, what our Justice Department thinks. And so you go to investigate it. We want to find out more. And Judge Boasberg says no. Yet again, this guy. Now, our Congress could impeach this guy, but they won't because they love the Federal Reserve. They love the status quo. Why do they love the status quo? Well, one of the things we learned on the show today is that the donor class of both Republicans and Democrats, they love the status quo. So as long as the donors love the status quo, you're going to get all of this pushback. So what do? Well, these people are not going to stop until they are made to stop. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy, but I want stuff like this solved. But stuff like this is going to have a hard time getting solved while we are in the Middle East. This will probably get no headlines over the weekend, but what will you see? You'll see. Honestly, let me just do this for a second because I will give you a brief update on what's going on in the Middle East because it is concerning. We do have 5,000 United States Marines now are being moved into the Suez Canal. From what I can tell, Wall Street Journal reported this. They're going to be closer. The idea is that they may try to take the Iranian side of the canal, which is a very fortified location. Please, I would just encourage all of you right now to pray for our troops, pray for our military, pray that we don't have more casualties. I have a feeling that the amount of casualties even right now are much higher than what we are being told. I want you to pray for the president, and I want you to pray that he will be given wisdom from heaven, whether he wants it or not, which, by the way, that's something that God can do because he's God and we're not. I want you to pray that the President of the United States will be given wisdom from heaven and not let this thing be turned into a quagmire. There are people around him who want this to define his entire legacy. They also want it to completely demoralize all of the people in this very unique, historic political coalition that we saw form in 2024. They want populism squashed. They never want to have to worry about this. What Janine? They never have to worry. They never want to have to worry about another Janine Shapiro trying to exert the Department of Justice's authority over the Federal Reserve again. They never want to have to worry about the Intel oligarchy being exposed as traitors. Okay? There's a whole lot of stuff that's going on right now, and there's a lot of big pieces moving behind, and it really all has to do with who's advising the president, who has his ear, and I would urge that you pray for President Trump, that the people around him would be God-fearing Christians that would do the right thing. So, please do that. Do it now. Do it when it comes to mind. Over the weekend, please pray, because the Lord sees all, knows all, hears your prayers because of Jesus. So, let's take some of your comments while I am thinking about it. R-Star says, I will not be demoralized nor deterred. Rise up, everybody. Eileen Jimenez, amen. We are in agreement, praying together, amen. There are a number of God-fearing Christians around President Trump, but there are also some satanic demons around him. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, I'm sorry. I'm not going to qualify. I tell you what. Let's just all. What I was going to say was I was going to qualify once again, but I don't feel like I have to do that. It's just dumb at this point. There's no benefit. There's no benefit in it. So now for my favorite segment. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, my favorite segment. I've only got you guys for about 14 more minutes. Here it is. By the way, I was listening to Hannah Faulkner. I really like Hannah Faulkner's show. I appreciate her. You want to talk about an encouraging show, how unapologetically Christian she is, how her content is fantastic, and I heard her talking about lady pastors today, and I heard her saying that lady pastors, biblically speaking, aren't a thing. To R. Star's point, nobody tell Paula White that, okay? And so I previewed this in the chat earlier. Hey, look, okay, well, this is a great opportunity for my favorite segment, my favorite reoccurring segment here on the Paul Harrell program, and it's this.
And let us confess our faith today in the words of the Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God.
And now it's time for I'm Already Against Women Clergy. You don't have to convince me.
So for this week's, today's I'm Already Against Women Clergy, you don't have to convince me, comes to you courtesy of a good follow over on X and a good website, Protestia. Protestia headline, United Methodist Church suspends lady pastor who worked for Jeffrey Epstein and oversaw island operations. The United Methodist Church, Protestia writes, Bishop Robert Farr has suspended a pastor from clergy responsibilities after learning she worked for Jeffrey Epstein. The Reverend Stephanie Remington is her name, a member of the Missouri Conference that Farr leads, worked for Epstein first as an administrative assistant from August to December 2018, and then as a temporary property manager of his private island from January until May 2019. That was when he was allegedly a convicted sex offender, but before his second arrest in July of 2019 on charges of sex trafficking of minors, before he killed himself and was extricated somewhere. While Remington is not being accused of a crime, she's been suspended for 90 days while the Episcopal Office reviews the matter in accordance with church legal procedures over some discrepancies in her story and actions. Remington served for more than 15 years as a pastor at various United Methodist Church. So the UMC started allowing lady pastors a long time ago, right before they started allowing the gay stuff. By the way, in the mainline denominations of mainline American Protestant denominations, this is a typical pattern that you see, where they say the scriptures don't say. We're going to ignore what the scripture says about male church officers, and we're going to allow women to be church officers. And by the way, why would they ever deny? I mean, you would think, well, what they of course they would deny. It's what the Bible says. But if you are tempted by culture, and if you're tempted by the changing times and you feel like the church isn't good enough anymore, the church has to apologize for God's word, well, then they quit apologizing for it and they just give in. I have said for a long time now that if you don't hold to the word of God, and your church back in the day, in the 70s, back in the day, your church was like, women can't be pastors. That's our conviction. But you would say, that's not our conviction, that's just our tradition, but I'm open to the discussion. So some lady comes to you and says, I think I can be a pastor. And society in 73, 74, what did society say? The Supreme Court in 73, 74 said women have the sole right to murder. Women are a protected class, and women can murder their children. and there's no consequences for it. Is somebody that's loosely holding on to Scripture going to be able to tell a lady who's been given the right to murder their children they can't be a pastor? It's kind of silly if you think about it from the wisdom of men. Well, it is kind of silly. We're protecting them from murder charges. How are we going to keep them out of the pulpit? So the Missouri Conference of the United Methodist Church says that following her leave, Remington submitted paperwork stating that she was performing extension ministry at the Wesley Theological Seminary in their Lewis Center for Church Leadership. She then moved to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where she worked for the seminary as a remote part-time contractor from 2017 to 2018, after which she left, all the while claiming she was doing ministry duties there. She said she's doing ministry duties. Along with her departure not being noted, her subsequent employment with Epstein was also not shared, as the conference had no knowledge of it and was almost certainly never going to approve it. The conference said in a statement, the Missouri Conference had no knowledge of the individual's association with Mr. Epstein. No information indicating this association was disclosed in any of those reports. The bishop or district superintendent were not contacted by the individual's interest in or acceptance of the Epstein-related position. Clergy are called to uphold the highest standards of spiritual and moral leadership. Concerns of this nature are taken seriously and require careful review. We recognize the deep harm connected to Mr. Epstein's crimes and remain in prayer for survivors who deserve healing and justice. The United Methodists, the UMN, further reports, Remington said she did file a report last year and later told her district superintendent through Zoom about her time in the Virgin Islands, including her work with Epstein. She said she was unsure if the district superintendent fully understood her mention of Epstein. The conference said in its statement that no information indicating this association was disclosed in any of her reports. The bishop or district superintendent were not contacted about the individual's interest in or acceptance of the Epstein-related position of island coordinator. Remington, whose name appears more than 1,800 times in the Epstein files, was primarily tasked with running the day-to-day operations of the island, including arranging travel for guests. Interesting. Remington acknowledged that she went for a period without submitting any reports and said she never received any follow-up from the conference. She also said no conference leader contacted her to see how she was doing after her divorce. Huh. Okay, then. Well, this is just an article full of red flags, isn't it? While acknowledging her NDA, she told the UMN that she never witnessed Epstein or anyone else on the island engage in abuse. In her personal blog in 2019, which was written under a pseudonym, she spoke frankly about her decision to work for Epstein. Quote, "So when I wanted so deeply to move back to the islands and this dream job fell in my lap, I literally got paid well to sit in an air-conditioned glass front beach office to play with numbers and organize information all day. I had to grapple with whether or not I could ethically accept it. As I've mentioned before, the billionaire from whose loot my paycheck would come was a reputed scoundrel. He had been accused and convicted of doing some deplorable things more than a decade prior, and I just didn't know if it would be wise for my reputation or my soul to put myself into this network, into his network." She did take the job, however, explaining, quote, "At the end of the day, the only thing I'm obligated to stand for is what I believe is right. And what I believe is right does not always agree with what the rest of the world thinks. But to conform my way of being in this world to the expectations of others, once again, would be the antithesis of how Jesus lived." Oh, no. No. She went there, folks. She went there. This is what happens when you depart. And she's a lady pastor already, but she's literally like, I worked for Epstein. I know it's wrong, but Jesus tells me it's okay. Oh, my goodness. That is sick. Jesus built his friendships not with the elite of his communities, but with the criminals and outcasts of society. Okay, Miss Lady Pastor, did you ever meet Jeffrey Epstein and tell him to repent? Did you ever meet Jeffrey Epstein and tell him he was a fornicator and that he is on a path to hell if he doesn't repent? And of course you wouldn't say that, because A, you're a lady pastor, and B, you're a Methodist. It outraged the religious people of his day and eventually led to his execution. And I felt if I withheld the... Oh, my goodness. You talk about coping with your own bad decisions. Forbid it that any woman does something wrong and actually admits it and faces responsibility for their actions in the 21st century. It outraged the religious people of his day and eventually led to his execution. And Jesus was framed and accused of blasphemy. Jesus was executed because he claimed to be God. And he is God. She goes on, and I felt that if I withheld relationship from this man because of his past, then I would be turning my back on every message of hope that I... So, was there a relationship between this pastor and Jeffrey Epstein? Is that the subtext that I am... Are you guys getting the same subtext that I'm getting if I withheld relationship from this man because of his past? So, this is what she looks like. Interesting. Well, we don't know, but if there was a relationship in exchange for money, no wonder she's citing Jesus hanging around with prostitutes. I got nothing else, folks. I got nothing.
This has been I'm Already Against Women Clergy. You don't have to convince me.
I mean, come on. What are we supposed to do with that? What exactly are we supposed to do with that? Hey, so on Monday, the program on Monday, we're going to be talking with once again on the program, the candidate for Arkansas Secretary of State, Brian Norris. That is going to be a very interesting show. And it's going to have national implications as well as state implications. There is a battle going on right now in Arkansas politics over this Secretary of State position. And it is clearly establishment versus anti-establishment or grassroots. Establishment versus grassroots is really the more apropos way to describe it. And we'll be talking with Brian Norris. I understand Rob Spencer, co-host, supposed to be here. Eric Haynes, I believe, is planning on being here. So we may have 4 people in studio instead of just 3. And so it's going to be a great conversation on Monday. You do not want to miss it. Also, that's at 5 to 7 Eastern on Monday. Also, Monday, I'll be back in the chair for Jeremy Harrell, no relation, for his midday show from 11 to 1 Eastern. That'll be my last day doing that during this stint where Jeremy is taking a break. Jeremy Harrell will be back for his show live from America on Tuesday of next week. That is all the time that I've got. This is my weekly reminder that I hope you have a great weekend. My weekend reminder. I hope you have a great weekend. Go to church. If you don't go to church, find a church that preaches the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ and his mighty ability to save sinners. And for those of you who do go to church, have a blessed Lord's Day. We'll see you on Monday.